Hi everyone. So a big topic that's come up quite a lot is, do we need religion for morality? And this you can find all over YouTube, all over anywhere actually. A great researcher worth looking at is Frans de Waal, who's a primatologist. But there's loads of others. All the popular atheists have the same basic line of thinking, which is this. Number one, you already see strong moral social behavior built into communal behavior in animals and even in insects and all the way through the evolutionary story of biology. Number two is that the modern religions we have in the world are only a few thousand years old, whereas humans have been living together, must have therefore had some rules for cooperation and interaction and moral principles going back long before then. Now, I'm not here to debate either of those. I think they're both manifestly correct. But I don't think that's what modern morality is actually about, and nor in particular the significant contribution of religion to all that. And especially I'm going to talk in the frame of monotheistic religion. And you see, humans, it seems, like animals, are designed to live and can work on simple social codes and moral codes for quite small numbers. Right? If you look at hunter-gatherer populations, they're typically around 60, maybe 100 people. And that's kind of the limit of our empathy and the community of which we can actually be close friends or have a relationship with, roughly that sort of number. You can have Facebook friends or Instagram friends vastly exceeding that number, but close relationships are hard to produce beyond that number, and the odd person may be able to, but communities can't really function at levels where you empathize deeply with every single member when you get beyond that sort of number. And what started to happen is it was with farming, really, that humans start to produce these massive settlements. And in fact, the archaeological record shows, interestingly, as these massive agglomerates happen, let's say in Châtellerault and Jericho, then they suddenly go out of existence. And we don't know exactly how they lived, but we know that later on, roughly 5,500 years ago, when modern civilization begins, that is to say, humans now in socially complex societies. That means some people ruling and some people being ruled, somebody directing things so that you can all really work together, always seem to produce very hierarchical societies. See, Group A that I have strong empathy with conquers Group B, and then it seems to, create two-tiered systems, and they conquer Group C, and then a three-tiered system. So this type of value system is the norm across the world as things develop, and a huge emphasis on the power of militarism. Lots of values that today we would find quite shocking were the norm when humans developed civilization, writing, social complexity, and so on. I'll give you some examples, by the way, and this already goes all the way back into the hunter-gatherers. But we today, if you had to kind of go around the world and look at all the different societies that exist, right, Islamic societies and Christian societies, communist societies and free market societies, all the different groups all over the world, right, Jewish and Hindu, all over the world, today certain values are quite universal. For example, human rights. Now, we might disagree with where the parameters are exactly, but we all agree, for example, that everyone has some right to life such that if they're innocent, you can't kill them. You need a very good reason. And the reason is not that they are your child or there's too many children born that year or one's disabled or anything like that. God forbid we'd balk at that thought. But in the ancient world, it was very normal to assume if too many children are born that year or if children are disabled and are not going to be productive on the farm, that you should just either kill them or let them be exposed. I mean, there's so much, you can Google this and research this, but one of the most famous, and people find it shocking, but it's not very shocking, is Aristotle writes about it in Politics, Book 7. An ideal city-state would have a law that in English translation, no maimed or imperfect children are raised, and if too many children are born, a limit must be, then some must be exposed because a limit has to be placed on the population of the state. People are shocked because Aristotle's so enlightened. We don't realize that was just the normal way of thinking. That our evolutionary heredity didn't give us anything different to that. And that's seems to be ubiquitous, very widely practiced across the ancient world, just because humans didn't think like we do today. In a very short span of time, we've completely changed the way, across all societies, pretty much the way humans think. Warriorship as greatness. You can see it in archaeological record, in burials, right? The way warriors were treated and in drawings and the mythology that kind of evolves around leaders being great conquerors. And your group was meant to go out conquering. That's what great people did. That's Alexander the Great is called great, not because he built great hospitals or ran a great educational network, but because he conquered. And that's what Julius Caesar, that's what all ancient rulers who are supposed to be good, or I shouldn't say all, there's always going to be exceptions, but that generally was with the association between greatness and glory and which are words we might use in moral terms today, and conquest and conquering. The Greeks, who we see were so enlightened, were so into warriorship. In polytheistic mythology, the gods are also into warriorship and conquering, and this is kind of the way the world looks at things. That war is some kind of, and conquering and heroism and idealism all go together. Other examples, you'll struggle to find in the ancient world mass education systems. You're always concentrating education into elites because basically you have the elite ruling everybody else. So even Athens, with its brief 30-year little flirtation with democracy, was really a relatively small 5 or 10% of the population. The oligarchy could actually vote and rule, but everybody else is subjugated in some sense. And then along comes a sweeping set of new values over a few thousand years that transform the world. That I believe, you trace its origin, certainly in huge parts of the world, goes back to the Torah. The idea that all men are created equal, right, endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, to quote the American Declaration of Independence. That sources through the Christian history back to the biblical text, through the ancient Israelite and Hebrew texts of the Bible. The idea that you're going to build a civilization where it's being judged by how it treats its poorest comes there, shattering the model that humans had built of hierarchical civilization. The idea of every child having an education. Right, the Talmudic principle that any village, anywhere, any town doesn't build a school should be excommunicated. These are radical ideas that shake up the world. Now, the Jews didn't bring these to the world directly, but they were brought through, let's say, Christianity spread them into Europe and huge parts of the world. Islam spread a lot of these ideas all over the world. Later on, the founding fathers of America felt that that the church had not been living up to these ideals, and they spread in so many different ways across the world. But today, the idea that every child has a right to life. You read that Tacitus attacks, actually, ancient Israelites and Jews for believing for not being willing to kill disabled children. But today, thank God that value spread throughout the world. Thank God for what monotheism gave the world. Now, you might say, okay, fine. So now that it's given the world all of this, we don't need it anymore. It's a great stepping stone for a few thousand years, but we got it. We're there. We've got the idea of every child having an education and social responsibility and caring for the weakest and the poor and social mobility and holding leaders to account, another biblical principle, right? In an ancient world where all rulers and leaders were way above the law, you suddenly have this idea of a supreme court and the prophets can rebuke the leaders and the public can hold them accountable. All these sorts of ideas which today are the norm, well, although not totally widespread today, but these values and these things that have changed the world, maybe we don't need them anymore. Well, we can't, we don't have two models of the future in front of us. But what we do have, interestingly enough, is already a lot of research in just the last few decades where religion in some parts of the world has been declining, or there's now religious and non-religious communities. There may be pluses to that, but there's one very, very strong not one, but a whole set of data now that's come out. And actually, I think the first person to really notice this or write about it that I'm aware of was called Arthur Brooks, who wrote a book called Who Really Cares, based on studying the American Social Survey and working out who gives more charity, who does more volunteering in the world. What are the big factors that distinguish people who do and don't? And you analyze every factor, age and ethnicity and background and wealth and income, all these things, throw it all together. And he identified 3 factors, but the top factor by far, was faith, was the level to which a person is committed. And it seems why that is not so clear, but it seems humans are very good at small-scale moral interaction. But when you can't easily empathize with people, and you're dealing more abstractly, it's harder to sacrifice for the good of others. If you're forced to by law and by police forces, you'll do it, right? But it's harder to self-motivate. Whereas a person who has a deep faith that they're here in this world to give, and that they're part of the Creator's plan in perfecting the world, has a very powerful impulse. Now, that's obviously in the big picture. In the small picture, of course, there's tons of horrific religious people and wonderful secular and atheistic people and so on. But when we're talking about as a society as a whole, Robert Putnam of Harvard also seems to have confirmed, and there's a lot of research confirming this, when it comes to giving, when it comes to strength of marriage, when it comes to happiness in life, but particularly when it comes to social values of volunteering time, effort, money, charity, and all this kind of stuff, that there isn't yet a good substitute for religion and the social capital that it generates and social investment it gives. Now, this is not to say, this is not in this particular discussion discussing whether religion is true or false and whether God does or doesn't exist. Those are separate discussions. But just this idea that, oh, we have morality without religion. We have some cooperation for sure. But the ability to live together in mass numbers and run a civilization and raise generation after generation in a strong, healthy, happy world of everyone giving seems to have been a huge innovation, a radical set of ideas that came through religion, transcending the values we had just from our own innate biology, being able to work together in small groups and allowing us to live together in civilizations that ultimately stop being hierarchical and fight for fairness. We may not get there, we've got a long way to go, but that value the life of everybody, no matter what their ability, that value the education of every child, no matter which strata or part of society they come from, that value social responsibility, that value peace as an ideal, even if we don't always live up to those ideals, and that value a world in which, whether we articulate it this way or not, everybody is loved by their one creator, everybody's in the image of that creator, and only together can we encounter that creator.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw, please click on the like and subscribe and hit the notification button below. Thanks so much.